condolences go out to the family of Odessa Sims. You know, it was really a sad day in Harlem yesterday for all of those who knew Miss Odessa Sims and knew her family and her Park family and all of the folks that just really just loved her here in Harlem. People have said great things about her and how she took care of the community and took care of folks. And we're going to miss her very much. I happen to have a street team, my organization, Street Corner Resources. We were out that night and we thought that things were pretty calm, even though we had a whole bunch of young people that had been in the park and that kind of thing. It seemed like they were moving out of the park and that it was, you know, going to be okay. And from somewhere, not necessarily from the park, but from somewhere, came a gunman, young man, chasing another young man with a gun and wound up shooting Miss Odessa 3 times. And my team and I went over to the hospital, and Miss Odessa had terminated life when we got there, just as we got there. And anyway, it's really sad what gun violence looks like. It's really, really sad. Her husband is still in disbelief, and I had to hear her husband tell his daughters that their mother was dead. And it was just horrible. It was horrible. So, we can't just say it was horrible and leave it at that. We have some work to do in our community, and I will be looking to the community for support in looking at where the guns are coming from, and also talking with parents about providing oversight for their children. Because when that's not provided, meaning when you don't take the time with those that are in your household, in your family, you don't provide the governance that young people need in order to be rightly guided and to be successful, we end up with children who fill our prisons or fill our grave, you know, or fill the grave. And we're seeing a lot of that. Just a week ago, I was talking with a mother whose son may be facing 17 years for a part in a murder. Just night before last, I was at the hospital standing over the body of Odessa Sims, who was shot by a young person. So it's like, this is too much. It's far too much, and we have some work to do. So I'm going to challenge parents to begin to talk with your young people, and if you've been talking to them, talk to them more, because a lot of times parents don't know what's going on with their young person. These young people have beef, they have situations, they are fearful, and when parents find out, they find out that they're fearful. Young person has pulled the trigger and has changed their entire life. Or they don't tell about a beef, and we wind up with a young person who is dead because the parent did not know, or the family did not know that they had beef, and to try to get them out of the way of that beef. So I'm going to ask and challenge our listening audience that wherever you are, with whatever you have, with whatever young people are around you, that use this as an opportunity to begin to have, again, the conversation about how they're doing. Some young people have not been mentally well, and we don't recognize that until they are incarcerated or, you know, facing incarceration, and that their mental health was not well. And so we need to take note of the change in behavior. The young person who is outgoing that now stays in their room in a recluse kind of way, not engaging, not talking, or when they have friends that you didn't ever see before and they're hanging out, they change the color of their clothes, they wear one particular color all the time. It's an opportunity to have a conversation and begin to look at what's going on before it goes bad. So I'm just not disgusted with the kind of violence we saw this weekend. As soon as we left the and when I say we, I mean Street Corner Resources, the organization of which I founded. We have the mayor's contract on cure violence, and so we're out in the street. Our catchment area is 137th Street to 145th Street, and one of the things that we saw was when we left the hospital with Miss Odessa Sims' husband, that we saw on 139th Street, shots had been fired, and the street was highly illuminated. The police had brought out some very bright lights. Cups were on the ground that marked where the casings were, and we were trying to decide, do we go to that crime scene or do we walk him home? It was more important that we stay with the husband for a little bit, and then come back to that crime scene, since it was no one, it seemed like no one was hit at that point. It was shots fired. No sooner than we go to that crime scene, after we walked him home, we go to that crime scene and we find out that everything's okay, no one was hit. We walk back down to the store. I'm almost forgetting this sequence of events, and it's just so crazy. And we find out that 2 young people were shot on 144th Street, just a couple of blocks away, and only 1 block away from where Miss Odessa Sims had been shot. So we go to the hospital, Harlem Hospital, and we find out that these 2 young people are in stable condition. Both were shot, but that they were going to be okay. We leave the hospital, go back to the area of 139th Street, only to hear shots fired while we're outside, someone's shooting, and we had to run into the store to take cover. So it's clear that there are a number of guns in a community, and they have made the community unsafe. And some people will say, how do the guns get in the neighborhood? Well, the guns come up the Iron Pipeline, which is called I-95. They are usually purchased by what is called a straw buyer. A straw buyer is a person who purchases the gun for someone, legally purchases the gun for someone who can't buy a gun, meaning someone who has a felony background, or they just can't purchase the gun on their own because of background. And usually that person is willing to participate in bringing those guns back up the Iron Pipeline, which Iron Pipeline again is Interstate 95, and those guns wind up in particularly poor neighborhoods and are used to resolve conflict, as opposed to people working things out. Young people are pulling triggers very quickly, and those guns, when they come into the neighborhood, they're sold on corners right near you. So I'm going to ask that the community pay attention to what's happening, pay attention when people pull up and are doing things in their community that they're not accustomed to have happen. And we have to report those things, because if not, it could be your 4-year-old, like in the case of Cheyenne Norman, whose 4-year-old son, Lloyd Morgan, was murdered about 3 years ago in a park because some kids were shooting and they shot her son while he was standing next to her. We can't have that. So I'm going to ask people again that the community stands up against violence, and that you pay attention to what happens in your community. And we have an opportunity to police our own community, and that means we got to get about the business of doing that. We have to get about the business of doing what's necessary to police our own community. I'll be right back. All right, let's go.